The Trump administration is set to freeze funding to family planning groups, including Planned Parenthood. And a bill has been introduced in the Senate that would prohibit federal funding of research using tissue obtained through abortions. Here with analysis of these developments and much more is neuroscientist and senior ethicist at the National Catholic Bioethics Center, Father Pacholczyk. Father, thank you for being here. The U.S. Senate voted Tuesday evening to confirm President Trump's pick to lead the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Bhattacharya. He's been on the show before. He was a leading voice during COVID-19 against lockdown measures and vaccine mandates. In his confirmation hearing, Dr. Bhattacharya said that he would not allow the use of aborted fetal tissue in research. Watch.
Will you prohibit the use of aborted fetal tissue in NIH research, NIH-funded research?
Senator, I'll absolutely follow the lead of Secretary Kennedy and President Trump on this. In public health, we need to make sure the products of the science are ethically acceptable to everybody. And so having alternatives that are not ethically conflicted to fetal stem cell lines is not just an ethical issue, but it's a public health issue.
Father, are you encouraged by the confirmation of Dr. Bhattacharya, and what kind of ethics reviews do you think he'll set into motion as head of the NIH?
Yes, I'm very encouraged, Raymond. I think that there's a high likelihood that he's going to set into motion good ethical review. You know, I think back to the former Trump administration, and they set up a commission that, served and did great work on this, the Human Fetal Tissue Ethics Research Advisory Board. And I had
you
the
were on
privilege.
that board, by the way.
Absolutely, yes. And it was a remarkable group, Raymond. I mean, there were 15 of us as members, and I've never seen, such seriousness about ethics in research. It was a delight to be a member, and we reviewed grant proposals to the NIH. And if those grant proposals were suggesting that you should be able to use tissues from abortions or cells derived from abortions, then those proposals came before us, and we either did, thumbs up or thumbs down. And it was incredible to see the effect of this. And of course, there was a lot of pushback from many in the science community who said, we're good at providing our own ethics. You should allow us to auto-regulate, that sort of thing. And they were very upset, but it was effective. And I think that it's likely there will be a board of that kind again, or some other mechanism via which there is sureness that our tax dollars are not going in the direction of supporting morally objectionable research. Most Americans, I think he was right in his testimony when he said, Americans want to be comfortable about using the kinds of medicines, vaccines, and other developments that come from science and not have kind of a torn conscience over this and a divided conscience in some way.
Father, people sometimes say that if we allow the use of tissues from abortions to develop treatment and cures, that helps redeem the unfortunate occurrence of abortion. Why does it not redeem abortion to use those tissues? And what do you say to members of the scientific community who say, look, I've got a permission slip from the woman who had the abortion, and she said this is fine with her?
Yeah, that's a very common ploy that is used by scientists. Yeah, absolutely. And they say, it's all ethically good here. We got the signature on the dotted line. Don't worry, we're fine. But the problem is, whenever you do a request for informed consent from somebody on behalf of someone else, and that's what's happening here, it's the mother on behalf of the baby, well, the assumption is that you have the best interests of that person that you're giving consent for. So like if you or I were doing that for our mother, as she's dying, she becomes unconscious, I give consent for a particular surgery, I have my mom's best interest in mind. But in the case of the abortion, the woman has categorically demonstrated by choosing the abortion, she does not have the best interests of this child in mind, and therefore she has disqualified herself from being able to give informed consent. So very, very important point here. We shouldn't be playing along with these kinds of fictions that the scientists sometimes put forward that are just sort of workarounds to avoid the real ethics that are involved. And then the question you raised about, redeeming
Redeeming.
redeeming the abortion. A lot of people think that, oh, if we can use some of the cells derived from the abortion, it will redeem the act, a terrible act. But in fact, what it does is it exacerbates the situation. Why? Because we are failing in that instance to respect the remains of the dead. And that's our duty at that point. We shouldn't allow scientists to come in and chop up the bodies of these young and vulnerable human beings who have died and put them up for sale. I mean, you may recall the whole controversy with the University of Pittsburgh where they were doing this, and there was payment that was being made for different body parts, livers, thymuses, heads of the babies, that $550 per head it was. So just a remarkable loss of a sense of the moral compass that had happened there. And this suggestion that somehow we're able to redeem an abortion, again, is another one of these fictions that gets out there to justify what is, at the end of the day, Raymond, unjustifiable.
The Trump administration is expected to freeze about $20 million in funding to Planned Parenthood, Father, among other organizations that receive family planning grants. Now, they're really reviewing whether the recipient is in compliance with President Trump's directive that all these federal contractors remove diversity, equity, and inclusion programs or initiatives from their facilities or programs. Planned Parenthood is responsible for around 400,000 abortions annually. How important is this executive review?
I would say this is extremely important. You mentioned that the review is being done under the auspices of looking at DEI compliance. And I mean, it's worth noting, many Americans don't know this fact, but Planned Parenthood has very quickly moved into LGBTQ activism, and they are one of the groups that make available hormones to young people so they can start gender transitioning. And this is, you say to yourself, well, gee, I thought they were involved with dealing with women's health. So they've gone, in very, very diverse directions. And this, I think there's going to be a lot of concern in terms of the DEI compliance. But, to go further here, I think it's important to understand that Planned Parenthood has, in a certain sense, been getting taxpayer subsidies for a very long time. They receive close to $500 million altogether. And this is a type of funding which theoretically everybody says, oh, they're not allowed to use it for abortions because of the Hyde Amendment. Well, we all know what happens. The money goes in, it's putatively for contraception or for some other aspect of women's health, but it just gets rooted into the support of the entire structure of Planned Parenthood. The money is diverted into, other forms of support. So it turns out that Planned Parenthood is not only the largest abortion provider in America, but it's also the largest recipient of Title X dollars. And these are grants that are supposed to be funding critical women's health services for low-income Americans. But the thing is, this money is given out to Planned Parenthood upfront. It's an upfront donation, which is different, for example, than Medicaid, where you get money after the fact. So this is a direct support of the many wrongs that Planned Parenthood is supporting. And taxpayers are right to be up in arms on this and to be saying, we don't want our funds to be going to supporting a group like Planned Parenthood, especially to the tune of $500 million.
Yeah. Father, look, this is all very consistent with, well, you saw it up close. This is very consistent with the Trump administration's record during the first go-round on life. I mean, it sort of made me laugh this week when I see some of these so-called pro-life leaders who militantly opposed the election of the current president, fuming about how Trump was not pro-life during the campaign and would endanger the cause, who now are injuring their fingers writing, "Oh, big win for the president, this is great," as if they were on the campaign. I haven't seen people change costumes that quickly since I was backstage in the theater, Father. But I guess the fundraising has to continue, and the amnesia is a reoccurring condition for some. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I think, it's important that we acknowledge the kinds of positive changes that are occurring in the administration, I believe. I know some people are critical from, vantage points of immigration or other angles, but it's very clear that there are many steps that have been taken that are very pro-life by this administration. Because we did a show not that long ago on IVF and the Trump position on IVF. That's clearly a problem as well. So it's not perfect, but we've got to be honest people who look at the good and affirm the good when we find it, and where there's problems, we point them out and work to improve the situation in our government. The U.S. example, just to close on this, Raymond, I think the example that the United States provides to the rest of the world, there's no substitute for it. Whether you're talking about funding of fetal research, whether you're talking about funding of abortion entities like Planned Parenthood, everybody watches what we're doing. And so our example becomes really critical in policies being made not just at home, but overseas.
Yeah. Father Tad Pacholczyk, I thank you for always calling balls and strikes in this area, which we always try to do here. And I know not everybody's happy with us when it's over, but we call them as we seize them. Father Tad Pacholczyk's commentary at the National Catholic Bioethics Center can be found at their website, ncbcenter.org. Thank you, Father.
Thank you so much, Raymond.